I published a video a couple of days ago covering my first impressions of the object tracker in Final Cut Pro's update 10.6. Now I've had time to work with the new built-in tracker, this video is an in-depth look at some of the different ways to use the object tracker. And if you just take one thing away from this video, it's how critical it is to select high contrast items in your tracking. You'll see how important this is at the end of the tutorial when I track a logo to a wall. The object of this video is that there's a little bit about the tracker, but it's mainly a focus on how you'll use it and what you'll use it for. For example, blur out a license plate or track color mask, pixelate faces, add depth of field, color grade backgrounds behind objects, track multiple faces, add logos and text to walls and billboards. I'll show you how to do all of these effects, and along the way you'll see shortcuts about general techniques that'll speed up your editing in Final Cut. But there are some things that you need to be aware of in regards to changing the speed of clips and to the stabilization of a clip. I'll discuss those a little later in the video, but if you want to jump there, they're in the timestamps below. This tutorial's much longer than normal, and it's got a lot of detail. In fact, I've been tossing up making it into several separate videos, but I've opted to put it all in here. If you're just looking for a particular technique to learn, then check the timestamps below. You can also save this tutorial and refer back to it later. And it's not just a long tutorial to view. This has taken much more time than usual to research and produce, so it's really appreciated if you please like and subscribe, and of course press the bell to be notified. But before I get into discussion about object tracking, I just wanted to mention some minor items in the release notes to the Final Cut Pro update that I didn't mention in the last video. Along with object tracking and cinematic mode, Final Cut Pro included a new effect called neon that can be added to text and generators and even clips. And you'll see neon added in the red arrows in this tutorial. I'll also publish a fast and easy video that will feature the neon effect. Also in the update was XML 1.10, though the earlier version 1.9 can still be used. And I suggest you check with any person you're transferring the XML to, check that they're able to accept 1.10 XML. And make sure that they've got that version on their Final Cut Pro. If in doubt, I'd suggest you continue to use version 1.9, at least in the meantime. Anyway, on to the in-depth look at object tracking. During my recent frequent use of the inbuilt object tracker, I can absolutely now confirm it's faster than any other tracker that I've used. In my last tutorial, I concentrated on the manual method to add the object tracker to the inspector, and that's using the plus tracker option in the inspector. Now I've used it for a while. It's much easier just to drag the title, the generator or the effect, into the viewer and let it select a face or an object. Not only are faces automatically selected for you, but it also attempts to select other objects as well, even giving them different names. That's face or object. I think it's worth pointing out here though, so that you're absolutely clear that the tracking feature is always active. You just choose to use it when you want. No need to turn it on or off, just ignore it if it's not needed. So let's review how to simply add a title to be tracked. Select the clip in the timeline, press the X key. This selects all of the clip so that when you add the title, it'll cover the whole clip and not just the portion from where your playhead is placed in the timeline. Find the title that you want to use and drag it over the object in the viewer. There's a face, so it'll find that and label it. Or objects will be named object. Notice that the title covers the full clip in the timeline now. Select Analyze at the top left of the viewer and the whole clip is analysed. There are left and right choices, But you'll only need those if you want to just analyse from the left or the right of the playhead. And that's most likely to happen when you reanalyse a clip. In case you don't see Analyze, right-click in the viewer and select Transform. And you can move the title to any place on the viewer. The tracking information stays attached to the clip in the timeline. When you play the title, it may jump, and there are a number of things you can do. The most obvious is to turn off rotation in the inspector. Select the effect being tracked and go to the inspector, click the film strip tab, and to the right of transform you'll see a rotation. Turn it off. You can also adjust the different tracking analysis options that are in the main clip. Select the clip this time in the timeline rather than the effect. And again, with the film strip tab selected, then at the bottom of the inspector there are choices: automatic, machine learning, and point cloud. Normally you'd leave it on automatic, but point cloud appears to remove more jitter than the automatic mode. Point cloud is supposed to be less susceptible to changes in the motion of an object being tracked. And a warning here, point cloud will stop working if the object moves behind a tree or something else that hides the face for a moment. Machine learning will be much more forgivable. And combined, it uses both machine learning and point cloud. And my suggestion is to try the different methods if you've got jitter. You can add another title, effect, or generator to the viewer and use that same tracking information. Drag the title above the clip where you want it to appear. Make sure the title's highlighted and resize and position it. Click the downward arrow and select the tracker. And one other thing I've learned is that if you don't yet know what title or effect you want to use, then you can track the clip first and then select the effect later. Select the clip in the timeline and then in the Inspector's Film Strip tab at the bottom, click the plus sign that's to the right of the trackers. The grid appears and you can select what you want to track and then press Analyze. Now press X to select the whole clip. Go off and decide what effect you want to add. Press Q and that effect is added above the whole clip. Notice it goes across the whole clip because you press the X key to select the clip in the timeline in the first place. Highlight the effect in the timeline and right-click in the viewer. Select Transform. Click the downward arrow and select Object Track. Most likely the tracking of text is the first thing that comes to mind when you're thinking about the object tracker. But let me tell you, the use of tracking shapes will be much more useful to you. And let me explain. Your first thought when you think of shapes will be how to track colour masks. So let's cover that with this clip of the two friends meeting. At the same time, I'll show you how different faces can be tracked in that same clip. It's got previous tracking information that I don't want, so I can remove that previous tracker by highlighting it in the inspector, make sure the yellow lines are around it, and press the delete key. I want to reduce some of the brightness on the girl's face with a colour mask. In the effects browser, I've selected colour wheels and dragged that over the face, and you can adjust the grid if you need. Press Analyze. You'll notice some differences from when you track the title. In the viewer you'll see shape with the link icon highlighted rather than transform and the link item not highlighted. You'll also see that the effect in the inspector has a shape mask added, and it always pays to scrub through the clips at this stage to check that the tracker has followed the face, even after the hand obscures it for a moment. You'll see the shape mask in the viewer and it's got a feather area around it that's over the background, and the result of this will be that it'll highlight the background as well as her face. so that feather in the shape mask can be adjusted to suit. But a warning first, if you change the shape mask now, it'll also change the grid for the tracker, which will affect the tracking information already attached to the clip. So click the link icon to untrack the shape mask from the tracker grid. Now you can adjust the feather in the shape mask without changing the grid. And the secret to adding colour correction, that's in almost all situations, is to make it as subtle as possible. Otherwise, it's going to look unrealistic. But for this exercise though, I'll exaggerate that correction so you can easily follow the effect and see it. Also notice that the tracking has been interrupted by the hand passing in front of the face. You could reanalyze that after the hand passes. So right click on the clip in the timeline and select Show Tracking Editor. Find a point after the hand passes in front of her face. Click and drag in the lighter blue line and select Analyze. And if that doesn't work, you can add keyframes to move the shape mask after the hand passes. Click in the timeline where the hand is passing the face. In the inspector, add a keyframe. Move the playhead to the point that the face comes back into view and adjust the shape mask over her face. And now to blur a face. Let's hide the other face with a blur, or we can pixelate it. First though, it's a good idea to label the different face masks so you know which is which. With the clip selected in the timeline, in the inspector, double-click the word Face Track and change it to Girl's Face. Select a Gaussian blur in the effects browser and drag it onto the boy's face. And for this one, it probably would pay to increase the size of the grid a little, as you want to be sure to cover the whole face, and your viewers will accept that part of the background will be covered as well. Increase the blur amount and even boost it a bit. Press Analyze. And finally, rename the tracker's name in the inspector to Boy's Face. And notice when you select the trackers in the inspector, the different masks show up in the viewer. Now let's look at blurring a license. And I'll use the pixelate for this exercise. Select all in the effects browser and search for PIX. Drag pixelate to the license plate. Then reshape it to fit that license plate. And make sure that you select a high contrast area. Move the center circle over that contrast area. You may need to resize the viewer to see it better. Unlock the shape of the viewer. Reduce the feather. Select the tracker again and analyze. You could add a pixelate to the other cars without having to analyze them. Drag pixelate to the second license plate and resize the grid. Unlink it, reduce the feather, select the downward chevron and select Object Track. You could use the same technique to magnify an item on the screen, and I've previously got a clip where I've used the magnification. Now let's sharpen a face. And this was really useful where you've had a camera set on autofocus and it's focused on the background rather than fully on the face. This is much the same technique as using blur or pixelate effect, but you're using the sharpen effect instead. But as you'll see, there's a real way to be able to do this for just part of a clip. In the clip of the boy on the bike, you may have noticed that the camera follows the face and it goes out of focus for a second or two. So let's try and fix that. Find the points that the focus changes, and with the B key held down, scissors appear. Click to cut each position and release the B key. Drag the sharpen effect from the effects browser over the face in that cutout section. Adjust the sharpening in the inspector. And just as with color grading, try to make the amount of adjustment really subtle. And now to add depth of field to a clip. With this clip, I want the person getting the haircut to be featured and the rest of the background to be blurred. Drag the Gaussian blur over the person and adjust to cover as much of him as possible without overlapping too much of the background. Analyze. The blur is on the person, so to invert that, select the shape mask icon to the right of the view masks. Adjust the amount of blur. And in a similar vein, we can color grade background behind objects. And this is very similar to the last example, and you can use a number of effects, color wheels or colorize for instance. In this case, let's use colorize. Drag it to the face or object you want to feature, and as in the last example, invert the mask and then adjust the color effect. In this example, we'll put a logo on the wall and it will track as the clip moves. This effect requires the logo to look believable as part of the wall, so it's important to meld it into the substance of the wall. So let's add that logo to the wall behind the breakdancer. Select the clip and press the X key. Drag the logo to the wall, looking for a really good contrast point. Adjust it to cover just that high contrast area. Click Transform and resize the logo to fit and use distort and rotation if you need to. It's a good idea to select Overlay to make it look as if it's part of the wall, and you may want to reduce the opacity a little so that the texture of the wall shows through. Select Tracker at the top of the viewer and press Analyze. Now play. You could turn off rotation and select point cloud analysis if necessary. As I've said several times, and I can't emphasize enough, the contrast of the object being tracked is just so very important. In fact, it's absolutely critical. Look at this clip with the hand just roughly selected with the grid. Now compare the motion of the tracking with the same clip where the contrast is very carefully selected. From time to time, you may be confronted with situations that could affect the tracking analysis. Let's consider some of those so you know what's likely to happen in advance. First, let's look at speed changes. From the testing I've done, speed changes don't seem to affect the original tracking information after the analysis. Let's try this clip here with the boy on the bike. I'll select a blade speed by using the Shift plus B and slow down the end of the clip and then extend the text over it. Now I'm playing that and it looks quite fine. Now stabilization. If you're stabilizing a clip, I suggest you do that first before adding a tracker. Let's look at this clip. It's got a bit of camera shake, and that can be removed by selecting the stabilization first. Now, select the track and press X. Now add a title to the face, resize and analyze. The green outline shows that the tracker has followed the face. If it turns red, then it means it's not following well, or in fact it may have lost the track point altogether. Now let's play that through and it looks fine. But this clip, which has already been analysed, if I stabilise it now, it'll not be as smooth. So right-click on the main clip and select Show Tracking Editor. Select all of the light blue line and click Analyze. Now let's play it again and it's much smoother. Now let's have a look at scale. So what this will do is it'll scale the size of an object being tracked as the subject comes closer to the camera. So we're using that same clip. I've selected the clip and pressed X. And now I'll add a custom title and drag that over the face. I'm going to turn off rotation and turn on scale. And I'll change the text to the word bigger. And I find that the tracker is better with point cloud in this situation. And as we play it, you'll see the text increases in size as she gets closer to the camera. And one final thought, the initial application of the tracker effect is very intuitive after you've used it for a few times. But to make it seamless, don't be frightened to adjust and to reanalyze. And these are the things to consider. Positioning the tracker. Make sure you've got a good contrast point selected with the grid. And resize the grid just to fit what you're tracking. And if you're using shapes, don't forget to unlink so you can do things like feathering, adjusting for jitter and unwanted movements. First, turn off rotation. Then, change the analysis method. You can add keyframes. And you can reanalyze by selecting the Show Tracking Editor, and that's by right-clicking in the track. And as with anything, practice makes perfect. I hope you've learned something from this video, so please like, subscribe, and press the bell to be notified of new tutorials every Sunday.